I appreciate it. So as Congress debates President Biden's response to the devastating violence in the Middle East and our border, 2024 Republican presidential hopefuls are speaking out on the war in Israel. Joining me now is one of those presidential candidates, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Forgive me, Governor. Let me ask you first about what's going on in Israel, because today is a very significant anniversary. 40 years ago today was the bombing in Beirut, in which we lost 220 Marines. We also lost 18 sailors, civilians, etc. Are we in danger of being drawn into a conflict that could lead to the death of Americans in combat?
Well, David, great to be on with you. But also 40 years ago, when we had that tragic loss of lives, we had a commander-in-chief that stood up and said, Ronald Reagan said, hey, it's my responsibility. This is on me. We've got right now, Joe Biden is trying to have it both ways. I mean, with the $10 billion that was released to Iran in June, the $6 billion for the hostage deal, not enforcing the oil sanctions on Iran. We're talking about the world's largest funder of terrorism. And Joe Biden is still living some fantasy about trying to keep this Obama-Biden nuclear deal alive with Iran. And when we're allowing money to flow to Iran and they're funding Hamas and Hezbollah, now he wants money to go to the Gaza Strip. I mean, Joe Biden's trying to fund both sides of this war and also to effect in Ukraine, because who's selling armed drones to the Russians? The Iranians are. Right. And so we have to, as your commander in chief, I would make sure that we're aligned in supporting our allies and not funding our enemies.
But, you know, Ronald Reagan, as I'm sure you remember, actually pulled the troops out of Lebanon after that disastrous bombing, thinking that perhaps this is not the place for American troops. Would you make a pledge to keep American troops out specifically of the war in the Middle East?
No, options have to be on the table. What good is American force if you're promising to not use it? We have to be there for our allies. Americans were killed on the October 7th attack. Americans were taken hostage as part of that. And of course, you know, when Joe Biden offered to pay $1.2 billion for five American hostages, at that moment, David, you understand international business. You've spent a career in Latin America. You understand kidnapping for Americans. We put a price on the head of every American tourist, every yes. American business leader, every American student abroad at over $1 billion. I mean, Joe Biden is negotiating with terrorists when he's giving money to Iran.
And it's clear that, by the way, when we were negotiating for the release of the five hostages by unfreezing that $6 billion for Iran, they were planning with Hamas to kidnap hundreds of people from Israel, including about twice as many Americans as we got out a couple of weeks ago.
Absolutely. And this is why, again, I mean, Joe Biden is confused. It's not even clear. I mean, his first remarks didn't even mention Iran. And I'm not even sure that the eradication of Hamas is one of his strategic objectives. I mean, he's trying to play it both ways because he's got people in his party that are sympathetic with terrorists. He's not in a spot where he can actually make effective decisions that are protecting American interests. America is safer and America is more prosperous when our allies are safe and prosperous. That has to be the objective of our national security policies.
And, Governor, of course, this aid package also includes border control, so-called border control. I don't know still what the specifics are and how the president would plan to spend money on a border which he has essentially left open. Do you think it's right to kind of jam those three things, the war in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, and our own border security in one package?
Well, national security includes border security, and we have not had national security under Joe Biden. With 6.5 million asylum seekers, think of it, David, that's the equivalent of every man, woman, and child in the state of Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, and then throw in the state of Montana. That's 6.5 million people. And on top of that, you know, I've been down to the border more times than Joe Biden has. We've had troops down there from North Dakota National Guard flying night helicopter missions from San Diego to the Gulf Coast trying to stop these transnational criminal organizations. We have another deployment of soldiers leaving just last week to go down there to help out. And what do we have? You go down there and get a briefing. There's 1.5 million known gotaways that were seen on camera but not had any kind of contact with our Border Patrol. And then there's another number, which the Biden administration doesn't know, which is the unknown gotaways, which could include, because we know from the ones that we've papered, that they're from over 100 countries, including all these nations and individuals that are on our terrorist watch list: Syria, Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. They're all coming across our border. The idea that there could be a Hamas cell already operating in our country, the risk of that has gone way up in the last 2.5 years. You can't let in 8 million people unrestricted at all and not expect that we're going to be paying the price down the road.
Let's talk specifically about the economy, because the president's having a heck of a time trying to sell Bidenomics. It's kind of, you're a former businessman. You know what branding is all about. The brand of Bidenomics is rejected by about 65% of the American people. They don't think Bidenomics is working. They keep trying to sell a brand that Americans don't want. What's that all about?
Well, it should be a brand that's got a bad rap with 100% of Americans, because it's not about being a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. Inflation is this insidious, invisible, hidden tax that comes like a thief in the night and steals your savings. People in America that had savings have lost 30% of that value in the last 2.5 years. And those that don't have savings, majority of Americans that pay to paycheck, are all paying about $700 more a month just to put food on the table and gas in the car because of Joe Biden's disastrous economic policies, which are underpinned by his completely disastrous energy policies, which then is a key driver of inflation.
Let's talk specifically. We only got about 30 seconds, but energy is really your specialty, being up there in North Dakota where you produce so much of it. What would you do to turn that situation around in America?
Well, first of all, day one, we got to start selling energy to our friends and allies, stop buying it from our adversaries. I mean, just this last week, buried under all this stuff, Joe Biden is releasing the oil sanctions on Venezuela, some of the dirtiest oil in the world. If you care about the environment, you care about American prosperity and American safety, you would want to have every ounce of energy produced in our U.S., not buying it from foreign adversaries. It's the right answer for economically, environmentally, and from a national security standpoint. Joe Biden, 180 degrees wrong on energy policy.
Governor Doug Burgum, who would also make a hell of an energy secretary, by the way. You're a great governor, and we don't know whether you'll be successful as president, but best of luck to you on the campaign trail, Governor.
Thank you, David.
Appreciate you coming in.